Today we're going to talk about why some homes never sell. And to start off, I want to show you just the canceleds and expireds in the last year around my location. So take a look at this. Pretty amazing, right? All of these homes in just a short radius around my location didn't sell in the last year for one reason or another. Now, I want you to imagine what this looks like if you were to look at all the homes in the United States that didn't sell. Incredible, right? Now, many people think that the reason a home doesn't sell is because of lack of marketing. However, I'm going to share with you today why marketing actually plays a small role and share with you the secrets as to why homes don't sell that I've learned from years and years of working in the real estate business. This information is going to be especially valuable for those of you that are either selling a home right now or plan to sell a home at some point in the future. So if that's you, definitely stick around. I'll go ahead and start out with the least likely causes, and I'll work my way up to the number one reason why homes don't sell. So let's go ahead and get started. So first off, having a tenant inside a property that you're trying to sell can create issues. Now this will be somewhat state dependent. In California, where I'm from, it's a bigger issue than it will be in some other states. But of course, there will be states that are similar to California as well, and a lot of these issues will apply. First off, accessing the property can often be very difficult when you have a tenant in there because many tenants don't want you to come in. They don't want to be bothered. And a lot of times they'll try to push all the showings to maybe an hour or two on a Saturday. And that means that if the buyers that are interested can't get in during that time that the tenant is comfortable with the agent showing the property, you can quickly lose momentum and all of a sudden find yourself with no interested buyers left. So as a result, buyers start scrutinizing the days on market. They start wondering if something's wrong with the property, if the tenant's going to be difficult, and then you're on a slippery slope that's hard to recover from. The next issue with tenants in a property that you're trying to sell is when the tenant doesn't want to move out and the new buyer is going to have to buy it subject to the lease that's in place or the tenant being in place when they become the owner. Now, most lenders do allow a buyer to buy a home that they plan to own or occupy with a tenant in the property as long as the tenant is going to be moved out within 60 days. Now, depending on the state that you're in, 60 days may or may not be enough to get a tenant out and to give tenant notice. In California, it certainly isn't. And so this can create an issue for a buyer trying to buy a property that they ultimately want to live in because they're not going to qualify for the types of financing that they typically would be able to if they were going to live in the home immediately. So what this ends up meaning from a loan perspective is that they might have to buy the property with a much larger down payment, like 25% down, with a higher interest rate because they're going to be buying it as a rental property instead of an owner-occupied property. And for obvious reasons, this just isn't going to work for a lot of buyers out there. And lastly, tenants generally aren't going to care how the property shows to potential buyers. And in fact, if they have a sweetheart deal on under market rents, in some cases, they may purposely try to make the property look less attractive so that way a buyer's not going to want it so it doesn't sell so they don't have to move. So the next thing that really causes properties to not sell is having limited access or showings. Now, in some cases, a seller just doesn't want to have frequent showings for whatever reason. Sometimes they don't want to let people come over in the evening because they're having dinner. Sometimes they only want people to come on the weekend at an open house or whatever. And this can be a real momentum killer and make it very hard to get a property sold. Many buyers, when they're excited, they see a new property hit the market, they're going to call their agent or they're going to click online to talk to an agent so they can get in there and see it as soon as they get off of work, maybe 6 o'clock, maybe 7 o'clock. Maybe they're going to be out of town the upcoming weekend and they're not going to be able to see it on the weekend. And you really want to do everything you can to accommodate getting buyers in as quickly and efficiently as possible. And especially right now with the market conditions that we're facing, where we have very low pending sales, a lot of inventory that's starting to sit on the market and a lot weaker buyer demand, this is more important than ever before. And I'm not talking about doing a ton of open houses here. That's not what I mean. Open houses are proven to have a very low success rate of actually getting a property sold. Oftentimes what they are is nosy neighbors that want to come see your property, or buyers that are much earlier in the process that aren't pre-approved yet, don't know what they want yet, or in some cases can't even qualify for your home. When you're dealing with a motivated, serious, pre-approved, and qualified buyer that has an agent, they already know that as soon as they see a property pop up online, all they have to do is send their agent a text or click a button online, and they can set up a showing at any time to view the property. They're not going to wait for the next open house to view it in most cases, and you don't want them to. You want to get them in whenever is convenient for them, so hopefully you get an offer quickly at top dollar. And the reason why, of course, is the more buyers you can get in, the more quickly you can get them in, the more likely it is that you start getting multiple offers, which means you can drive the price up, get better terms for yourself, and ultimately get the property sold. And the buyer is going to feel a lot more happy and a lot more excited knowing that they're the ones that got the property instead of the competition. Now, the next one that can really cause difficulties in selling a property is a condo in an HOA where the HOA isn't very good, or there's currently ongoing issues with the HOA. This can be a real deal killer, and in many cases, there is not much you can do about this, unfortunately, but sometimes you can. Many things can stop properties from selling in HOAs, such as spiraling expenses and future obligations that are going to be due to the owners, to constant large assessments, insurance issues, and in many cases, poor condition and poor maintenance of the property. And it's actually becoming an even bigger problem right now, more than I've seen in my entire career in 2025, given all of the inflation that we've been experiencing, as well as insurance problems that are plaguing many HOAs, in addition to a lot of new requirements in terms of work that needs to be done to the properties that they have to comply with legally, that they just don't have the reserves in place to deal with. So some things you can do is, if it's a large planned assessment, for instance, in the future, a seller can agree to cover this for the buyer, pay it in advance, or they can lower the price to offset what the buyer is going to have to pay. Obviously, many buyers are not going to be too excited about buying a condo where the moment they buy it, they know in the future they're going to have a massive assessment that's going to have to come out of pocket. And that's going to stop a lot of them from wanting to get into the complex, especially because they're going to be fearful that there's going to be more large assessments just like that after they become the owner. And if the problems are just too great, like for instance in California, HOAs are facing serious insurance issues due to the wildfires, or in Florida, there are many parts of Florida right now that are having serious problems because of new laws requiring extremely expensive retrofitting that condo owners can't afford. The value of these condos can start plummeting very quickly, and sometimes you have to just make a decision of whether or not it makes sense to cut your losses and get out before the value might even go down further. Now, the next one is not spending a few dollars and putting in a little bit of energy or elbow grease to make the property look as attractive as possible. As they say, you only get one opportunity to make a good first impression, and this is definitely one of those times where you want to put your best foot forward, make the best impression you can, so that way you attract as many buyers into the property as quickly as you can, because you never know which one is going to end up falling in love with your property once they've seen it. And real quick, if you need any help with real estate here in SoCal, or you need a referral to a great agent anywhere else in the country, feel free to reach out to me. My contact info is below. And moving on, the next one is not taking every single offer you get and every buyer that comes through the door seriously, and doing everything you can to make something work with each offer and with each buyer. And this is more important than ever before. Obviously, 2, 3, 4 years ago, when every property was getting 5 or 10 offers, it didn't really matter as much, but things are a lot different right now. And you've probably heard people say, or agents say, that often your first offer is the best. And that is absolutely true, especially in the market that we're facing right now. And even if that's not always true, what is true is that the offers that you get early on are almost always better than the offers that you get later on. As the property sits on the market and loses steam, buyers start thinking there's something wrong with it. You start getting lowball offers. You get buyers that are very hesitant, that are more likely to cancel for typical problems that they're going to find on any home that they go after. And it becomes more and more difficult to sell a property once you lose that initial momentum. So in a softer market like we're facing right now, you want to treat every offer with respect. You want to really think about what the buyer is offering and see what you can do along with your agent to try to make something work with them and bring the deal together. Because balking at an offer or two that you may get in the beginning could ultimately turn into long stretches where you don't get any other offers at all. You'd be surprised what happens with a little creativity and a little flexibility and a great agent on your side that is thoughtful, calm, and reasonable throughout the process, that is going to help try to bring everything together and make a deal work so everybody ends up getting what they want. The next one that really kills a lot of deals is hiring the wrong agent. And this can present itself in many different ways. Sometimes you may have an agent that is experienced, that's been around for 30 years, but only sells a property or two a year and really doesn't know what's going on at all. And in other cases, you might have an agent that's relatively new compared to that experienced agent that does a lot of business and really knows what they're doing and is super motivated and super aggressive at trying to make something happen. And in other cases, other things become problems. Like for instance, this is something that I face all the time as a professional when I'm representing a buyer. I'll call an agent and they don't even call me back. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Imagine trying to call the agent that's representing the seller and they don't call you back. So I've made it a policy myself. I will call, email, and text 3 times a day until I finally get a call back. And sometimes that's what you need to do to chase some of these agents down and find out what's going on. Now, obviously, you don't want an agent representing your most valuable asset who's not going to be answering the phone. And actually, believe it or not, one of the most common complaints I get from sellers who have had a bad experience with another agent is that their agent doesn't even call them back. Can you imagine that? This is something that absolutely blows my mind. If you're working with a seller, you have a duty, an obligation professionally to be responsive, to stay in touch, to keep them abreast of what is happening in the process of selling their home. And I just can't believe that there are agents out there that believe somehow in their mind that it is acceptable to just not respond to their seller clients. Another thing is, just because an agent looks sharp and has a fancy car does not mean that they're a good agent or they know what they're doing. So you have to be very careful who you hire, especially right now when it's much harder to sell a property than it was a couple years ago. The next thing that you have to be careful of when hiring an agent that may cause your property not to sell is hiring these big teams. Now, I'm not saying they're all bad. There are some good teams out there, but what is becoming very common with these large teams is that the person that comes out to meet with you, they're called the rainmaker. And you get to talk to them sometimes one time. And then after that, they're gone. They disappear. They evaporate like water on a hot day. And you're left dealing with people that work under them on their team. And the problem with that is that many times the people that work under them are newer to the industry and they're inexperienced. And so you may not end up getting the treatment and the care that you're really looking for and that you actually deserve. I actually had a past client who made this mistake, and she called me almost every day to complain about how terrible the agent was and how impossible it was to get any feedback or any clue of what was actually happening in the transaction. And the last one I want to share with you under this specific topic is hiring a discount agent. Now, it may seem that if you hire an agent that charges 0.5% or 1% less than a different agent, that you're actually going to save money. But my question to you is, if you save 0.5% or 1% upfront, but lose 5 or 10% on what your home actually could have sold for, how much did you really save? Well, of course, you didn't save anything. You lost a tremendous amount of money. When you hire a lot of these discount agents, for them to make the same living as everybody else, they need to sell 2 or 3 times as much real estate. So it becomes a game of quantity and not quality. Each individual client means very little to a discount agent because they have people lining up to sell their homes with them. So they're just going to go through the process, get your home on the market, and let it fall where it may. And in many cases, these agents are going to be the ones that are most difficult to get in touch with and to communicate with. And I'm not saying all discount agents are bad here, but certainly there is a trend, and I've noticed it through my experience over time. And we finally made it to the number one reason why a home doesn't sell, and that is overpricing the home. And this happens for many different reasons, but unfortunately, the result is always the same. Either a home that never sells at all, or that ends up selling for far less than it could have sold for had it been priced appropriately from the outset. One reason this is so common is because people tend to look up their home value online on places like Zillow or Redfin or Realtor.com. And these values that are generated from these websites come from algorithms, and they have a wide variance between them, and they have no way of knowing the actual condition of your home or its relative value compared to other similar homes that have sold in the area recently. All it can do is make an educated guess based on the information that it has, and in many cases, this is going to be off by up to 5%, even sometimes 10%, and in some cases, much more than that. There is no substitute for having a knowledgeable, experienced agent who's a professional who can take the time to look at all of the comparables and go over them carefully with you to make sure that you price your home adequately from the beginning. And I'll give you a quick example of what I'm talking about here. Let's say two people bought the same home in the same tract, same layout 10 years ago, and one person did no maintenance to the home, did very little on the inside, and the other person did tons of upgrades, made it absolutely beautiful, put in a gorgeous backyard and all kinds of cool fixtures and stuff. And on something like this, the algorithm is going to have no idea what the difference in value is between these two houses, and likely they're going to be priced exactly the same. However, the truth is, the reality is that one house is probably worth $100,000 less, $150,000 less, $200,000 less, or more, depending on where these houses are located and what kind of upgrades we're talking about. So the only way to really get this right is to have a great agent that's working with you to understand the subtleties of how your home compares to some of the other homes in the area. For instance, maybe your home has a much better view than the neighbor that just sold recently. Maybe your home has much nicer upgrades than the neighbor that sold recently. Or maybe your home is next to a large apartment building that brings the value down. There are always all kinds of different things that come up in these relative comparisons to properties, and they're very important to take into account up front so you make sure you get the pricing decision right from the beginning. And this is actually more art than science. In many cases, you're not going to get it exactly right, but you have to be realistic. And when you see that you're not getting the traction after the first week or two, you want to think about pivoting and adjusting quickly so that way you get into the right ballpark that you need to be in, so that way you start getting offers on your home and you compare favorably to the other homes that are on the market in your area that are similar to yours that buyers are looking at as well. Because as you know, we've shifted to a buyer's market in many parts of the country, and now buyers are starting to wait. They're starting to hold off on buying. They think that if they wait another week or month or 6 months, prices are going to be even lower. They're going to get a house for cheaper, get a better, nicer house for less money. And for this reason, if 5 similar homes are on the market to yours, you want to make sure that you're priced towards the bottom of that range. Otherwise, all you're going to do is help market your neighbor's home and get their home sold, while your home just ends up sitting and becomes one of those canceled or expireds that we looked at in the beginning of the video. And if you don't make the course correction that you need to when you need to, what often happens is you become the highest paying buyer in the market for your home. And let me explain what I mean by that. What I mean is that if there's no other buyers out there in the entire marketplace that think your home is worth what you have it listed for, and they're not willing to buy it, then that means by default, you've essentially bought your home back from yourself because you think it's worth more than everybody else does out in the marketplace. And that brings us back full circle, because those type of homes end up being the ones that don't ever sell and just sit on the market until they finally cancel or expire. So that wraps up this video. I hope this information was valuable for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Leave some comments down below. Let me know what you think. I appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you next time.